Hello friends, and welcome back to another reaction video. Thank you for stopping by. Now, if you don't know much about me already, I did spend almost 10 years in the US military, and 5 of those years I spent in Germany. And that has to do with today's video, which is titled US Military Bases in Germany, How Do Germans Feel About It? Again, this is another video by Feely. The original video will be linked down below. So let's just jump right into the video.
It's 2024, almost 80 years after the end of World War II, and the US still has about 35,000 troops stationed in Germany, in more than 20 US military bases. How do Germans feel about that? Hallo, Servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Feli. I'm originally from Munich, Germany, but I've been living here in Cincinnati, Ohio, on and off since 2016. And today I want to talk about a question that has come up again and again every time I ask you guys what you want to know from us Germans for my Ask a German category. And this is one of the more complex and somewhat controversial topics. What do Germans really think of the American military bases in our country? Now, to provide a proper answer to this question, I actually asked my community on Instagram, particularly my German followers, about their views on this topic, and the responses were super interesting, so I'm really excited to share them with you. But first, let's talk about some of the hard facts. Why does the US even have military bases in Germany to begin with? As you guys know, after the end of World War II, Germany was divided into 4 different occupation zones between the Soviet Union, the UK, France, and the US. While the Soviet occupation zone, which later became the GDR, or in German DDR, didn't become sovereign until the 1990s, when East and West Germany finally reunified, the occupation in West Germany was officially terminated with the Paris Accords in 1954, but it still allowed the Allied powers and a few other NATO members to have military stationed in Germany for defense purposes. And with the Cold War going on, that came in very handy. So for decades, Germany was home to military troops from the UK, France, the Netherlands, Belgium, Canada, and of course the US. With the end of the Cold War, most of these countries didn't have any need to maintain their military bases in Germany, so they pulled their troops almost entirely. The UK reduced their military presence from about 60,000 in 1988 to only about 300 today. Now, the US also gradually removed the majority of their over 250,000 forces, but they still have about 35,000 on more than 20 military bases in Germany today, which means that they're the strongest foreign military presence within Germany. And from a US point of view, the largest US military presence in all of Europe, and after Japan, the second largest in the world. And it's arguably the most important one outside of the US, because out of 6 regional combatant commands of the US military, 2 of them are headquartered in Stuttgart, Germany. AFRICOM, the United States African Command, which is responsible for all military operations in Africa except for Egypt, and the European Command, EUCOM, which is responsible for all of Europe, the Caucasus, Russia, and Greenland. Now, back in 2020, President Trump actually planned to withdraw about 12,000 troops from Germany, so about 1/3, but those plans weren't approved by the House of Representatives and the Senate, and when the Biden administration took over in 2021, they dismissed that and instead decided to add 500 extra military forces in Germany. Trump's official reasoning at the time was that he wanted to punish Germany for not meeting the NATO expectation of spending 2% of its GDP on defense, but most experts pointed out that this wouldn't have any advantages for the US. Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, who used to command the United States Army Europe, said, "The troops are not there to guard Germany, they're stationed there for us. Germany is a platform that allows us to do rapid reinforcements in Eastern Europe, for example, as well as other places."
Okay, that's true right there. The US military isn't in Germany to protect Germany. The US military is there because it is closer to deploy from Europe to other parts of the surrounding areas in case a conflict, breaks out. Afghanistan, Iraq. I was deployed to Bosnia way back in '98. So instead of having all the US forces have to deploy from the US around the world. They're already centrally located, so it's much easier and quicker and makes more sense logistically to deploy them from Europe.
He also said, "This is a complete gift to the Kremlin, a 30% reduction of US capability in Germany, disruption, and further damage to our most important relationships, and the Russians didn't do one single thing to earn this." Again, this was in July of 2020, so about 1.5 years before Russia attacked Ukraine in 2022. So at the end of the day, the American troops stayed, and when we look at how they're divided amongst branches, numbers from 2016 show that most of them are in the US Army, then the Air Force, Marine Corps, the Navy, and a small amount is in the Coast Guard. Geographically, most of the bases can be found in the German states of Hessen, Baden-Württemberg, Bavaria, and at the top of the list, Rhineland-Pfalz, where more than half of American forces are stationed.
That's where I was stationed. I was in Rhineland-Pfalz. My first duty station was Baumholder, and then my second one was Büdingen. So I can attest to, there's Stuttgart and all these other places in that area with military forces. Let's back up a little bit here. And play.
Top of the list, Rhineland-Pfalz, where more than half of American forces are stationed. That's also where the Ramstein Air Base is located, which is the biggest and probably most famous US base in Germany. It's right by the city of Kaiserslautern, and yes, that's also the air base that the German metal band Rammstein is named after, except that the band is spelled with double M. And I know I still owe you guys an update on that whole story. I'm on it, I promise. Together with other US military locations in the region, it forms the Kaiserslautern military community, where, according to official numbers, almost 60,000 American service members and civilian employees live and work. That includes military personnel, their families.
And that's where my wife is from. Well, not right in the city, but probably 20-30 minutes away from Kaiserslautern. So I'm very familiar with that area, Ramstein Air Force Base. I've been there many, many times, and the surrounding areas. That's our favorite place.
US contractors, and other civilian employees. They also employ thousands of German workers, and they're the largest US military community outside of the US. It's literally like a little America there. They use the US dollar as the currency, they have American stores, American restaurant chains, malls, American schools for the kids, and I've heard that when you ship packages to the US from there, you only pay domestic shipping fees because it's literally as if you were in the US. However, the bases are unfortunately
Okay, that's true, but you have to be on base or a part of the base. No just normal German can go there and ship things. So if we ship stuff back to my wife's family, or they have a contact that they can ship APO address, which yes, that would be domestic shipping. So I don't know if she made that very clear that just some other German with no ties to the military just can't go over there and ship stuff to the US unless they know somebody who has access to that. And please, if that is incorrect, if that's changed at all, please let me know in the comments. But the last I knew, you actually had to have access to the post office on base to be able to ship things like that.
Domestic shipping fees because it's literally as if you were in the US. However, the bases are unfortunately off limits to German civilians unless they're affiliated with someone in the US military, which apparently used to be different prior to 9/11. Nevertheless, American military bases often have a significant positive impact on the local economy. It's estimated that their presence generates a yearly economic boost of $4 billion in Germany, which, if those numbers are true, is a lot more than the amount of money money that the German government spends on the American bases in terms of subsidies and the land that's provided. Now, legally, these American military bases are still German territory where German law applies. But there are agreements between Germany and the US that grant the bases certain tax benefits and immunity, which as a result also means that German law enforcement can't access the bases without permission from American authorities. German police in those regions therefore often patrol together with American military police because the German police alone wouldn't be able to enforce any laws when it comes to US military members and their families. Now, before we talk about how Germans feel about this whole topic, what my personal opinion is, and most importantly, why people feel that way, I want to tell you about this amazing deal exclusively for my viewers from my sponsor, Private Internet Access, or short PIA. If you currently live for sponsoring this video. Okay, so we've talked about the numbers and laws and historical background, but what do Germans think about the American military presence in their country? If you had asked me this question 8 years ago, before I ever moved to the US, I honestly wouldn't have had an opinion on this. I mean, I didn't grow up near an American military base, and I didn't have any other personal connection to this topic through a family member or anything, so this wasn't a topic that I was ever in touch with, really. And there wasn't a single incident in my life where the American troops being in Germany seemed to affect me or my life in any way, neither in a positive nor in a negative way. I mean, it might have on a bigger scale, but not in a way that it was ever brought up in a conversation. I don't even remember discussing this in school. I don't know if we ever did. I mean, I knew that there were American military bases, and I knew that back in the 80s there was a terrible accident on the Ramstein Air Base, but that's...
My wife actually was going to go to that air show, I believe, or not going to go, but I mean, Ramstein is, 20 minutes from her hometown. They knew about it. It was a terrible, terrible accident. If you don't know anything about it, look it up. Terrible. But to this day, my wife doesn't want to go to any air shows because that is still that fresh in her memory.
Back in the 80s, there was a terrible accident on the Ramstein Air Base, but that's about it. It really wasn't until after I moved to the US and became part of this German-American bubble that I met people and got messages from people that used to be stationed in Germany themselves. I met German women at the American consulate in Frankfurt who had just gotten married to an American military member. I met so-called army brats, so people who grew up in an American military family in Germany, and I heard about how these military settlements are truly like a little America in the middle of Germany. So I learned a lot about this topic, but to be completely honest with you, I still don't really have a strong opinion as to whether having American troops in Germany is good or bad. I can see both the pros and the cons, and we'll talk about those, but I don't know what the best course of action would be. So I'm not of great help here, but I came across a few surveys on this topic. 2 of them are from the summer of 2020, right after Trump had announced his plans to withdraw a third of the troops. This survey, conducted by YouGov for DPA, showed that almost half were in favor of the withdrawal. 25% even thought that American troops should leave Germany altogether, while about 1/3 of those surveyed thought that the American military should stay in Germany or even increase their forces. And 21% didn't select an option. That would have been me, probably. But then another survey that was conducted at the same time for the German magazine Der Spiegel had about half of people opposed to the withdrawal, with only 36% supporting it. So it was almost flipped, which shows that the situation really isn't straightforward, and a lot of people are conflicted about this. Now, one aspect that German opinions were pretty clear about for a long time are the nuclear weapons that the American military stores on German ground. These surveys by Greenpeace from 2019 and 2020 show that 84% of Germans wanted the nuclear weapons out of Germany. In the YouGov survey from 2020, it was 2/3 of Germans, so a clear majority. However, a more recent survey from June of 2022, about 4 months after Russia attacked Ukraine, showed that for the first time, more than half of Germans wanted the American nuclear weapons to stay in Germany, and 12% even wanted them to be modernized. The number of people in favor of removing the nuclear weapons was at only 39% in this survey.
That's interesting, but at the same time understandable. Now, going back to the original chart that she had showed where it was 50% or nearly 50% wanting to withdraw, most, if not all, of the U.S. troops in Germany. I can understand that, but I think that depends on, again, where you are. Like she said, from Munich, there's no military presence in Munich. So how, they could have, yes, get rid of them all because their economy is not being affected by withdrawing that many troops, whereas maybe Ramstein, Kaiserslautern, those areas are opposed to removing the troops because that would greatly affect the economy in those areas. Without knowing the specific areas that this came from, like which states had the highest number of people saying no, withdraw everybody as opposed to keep them there, I don't know. And in the other chart that was almost flipped shows just how divided that topic might be. And again, it could be completely dependent on where those surveys were taking within Germany. Now, as far as the nuclear weapons, I completely understand with the Germans not wanting to have any nuclear weapons on their soil. However, after the Ukraine war, I can see why some of them say, yeah, please keep those here just in case. That's a very touchy subject because, as we all know, nobody is ever going to win in a nuclear war. It's just dumb to think that there's going to be a winner. So I can see why some would want them out while some would want them to stay.
The main points of criticism about the American military bases are that the German government doesn't really know what exactly is going on the bases and whether or not German law is being violated. Over the last decade, there have been numerous reports about drone attacks being controlled from Ramstein, potentially killing hundreds of civilians in countries like Yemen, Afghanistan, or Iraq. The German government has even been sued by Yemeni survivors who lost relatives in a drone strike. The first court ruled that the German government does in fact have to make sure that activities taking place on German ground follow international law, but the decision was overturned by a second court, then that was appealed, and now the case is going to the Bundesverfassungsgericht, which is similar to the Supreme Court. In addition to the drone controversy, there were headlines about NSA surveillance violations, or the case of an imam who was kidnapped by the CIA in Milan, Italy in 2003 and brought to the Ramstein airbase, from where he was transported to Egypt, where he was imprisoned and, according to his own statements, tortured. None of that is in line with German or international law. These are only a few of the incidents that have received.
That is interesting. It's something I wouldn't have thought of right off the bat. And I have to say that I wouldn't put it past the U.S. government to do things a little shady, knowing that, like she said earlier, the German police can't access the base without permission, prior authorization. They can't determine what's going on. So that's a really interesting point she made there. I would like to think that for the most part, the U.S. is abiding by international law and, all of that. But we all know how that goes a lot of times.
That is in line with German or international law. These are only a few of the incidents that have received a lot of media attention, but many Germans are afraid that this is just the tip of the iceberg. But let's see how my German followers feel about this. I actually got a lot of messages from you guys. Thank you so much to everyone who reached out and shared their views and personal experiences. I'm not gonna be able to read all of them to you guys, but I'll put a lot of them on the screen for you so you can just pause to read if you're interested in the details. Also, these answers are actually all all from June of 2023, because that's when I first asked about this topic. It just took me a while to put together the video, but better late than never. So just keep in mind that these are from June of 2023, might be relevant for political context. I'm gonna go through some messages that are rather positive, some were more negative, and a lot of people had very mixed feelings about the topic, but I particularly loved hearing about people's personal experiences with the military bases, so I'm gonna start with that. Anna wrote, I was born in Bad Kreuznach, then lived in Kaiserslautern and worked for a urologist in Landstuhl, directly at the Ramstein Air Base. We had a lot of patients from the military and everything in the region is bilingual. At McDonald's, the drive-thru says, Herzlich willkommen bei McDonald's. Ihre Bestellung bitte. Welcome to McDonald's. Your order, please. As a kid, I used to be woken up in the morning by military groups out on a run, the ones that sing or chant these songs while running. Fighter jets were completely normal for me, and then later in Lautern, the military planes from Afghanistan that brought injured soldiers and fallen heroes to Ramstein before they flew home to the States. I'm a pacifist and had to grow a thick skin whenever these planes landed, and they come several times a day for 24 hours. There are no night flight restrictions. I now live on the North Sea coast, but I feel relatively safe because I know that Ramstein exists. Ramstein is very important to the USA. As a NATO partner, they would always support us, so I'm glad that we still have the few remaining bases. Dominic wrote that he grew up about 15 minutes away from the bases Grafenwöhr and Hohenfels. His message was really long, so I'm gonna skip through it a bit, but he said, on the other side of the road, there were whole neighborhoods with American families, mostly officers. They were even allowed to bring their cars from America when they were sent to Germany. I liked the American influence in the area. Especially on Halloween, you could tell which houses were American. There are so many American products and foods to buy that you don't get anywhere else. There are German-American festivals at the bases every year, which is also a cool experience. If you want to go to the festival, you have to go through checkpoints and security screenings, which can be quite the adventure when heavily armed soldiers ask you in English to open all the car doors and sniff around with bomb dogs. They're random controls, of course, but I've had the pleasure. I got to know a lot of Americans, even at village festivals, and made some good friends. Unfortunately, they're not stationed there forever, and my friend Corey, for example, had to go back to the USA. There was also the possibility of getting onto the base with connections. Corey, for example, could bring 5 people with him under his supervision, and then you could shop at the American stores, which really import everything from the US to make you feel at home. I even bought a huge bottle of ibuprofen in a regular store, not a pharmacy. Quick explanation, in Germany you can't buy over-the-counter medication like ibuprofen or other painkillers at a supermarket or a regular drugstore. You always have to go to a dedicated pharmacy, and ibuprofen, for example, is also pretty expensive in Germany compared to the US, and you'll only get like packs of, I don't even know what the maximum is, like maybe 20 per pack or something like that. And there are American fast food chains like Taco Bell, Popeyes, Charlie's Cheesesteaks, and so on that don't usually exist in Germany. I've tried them all, of course. If you pay in euros, you'll get your change back in US dollars. One time, around Thanksgiving, we bought a huge turkey, which I have never seen in Germany. But everything you buy has to be taxed afterwards with a tax card at German customs. So it's like a piece of America in Germany. There are also cars everywhere, like the ones you would see driving around in the US, and when you're out on the road, you can often immediately tell which cars belong to an American, because they're models that don't exist here and because of the license plate sizes. Conclusion, my English has become really good thanks to the many contacts with Americans, but of course there are negative aspects too. The military training area takes up a lot of space, and you can hear them practicing from very far away. Artillery fire, for example, the grenades hitting. Depending on where you live, the windows sometimes rattle and the ground vibrates. The Americans also fly wounded people to the hospitals with huge Blackhawks. It's a bit scary too. But I personally appreciate their presence. On the one hand, you feel safer because they have a lot of weapons and equipment on site in case of war, but you also feel unsafe for the same reason. It would be an important target for enemies. But having sort of a portal just around the corner in Germany that leads you to the US is something special, without having to fly for 10 hours. If you speak good English, you can also work there, at a library, for example. I also had quite a few people message me that they met their American husbands because of the military bases. And even a few army brats, so the children of those relationships, reached out. Pause to read their full messages. Someone also said said that they started playing baseball because the Americans in the region started a baseball club, which sounds really cool. And here are a few more positive experiences. My father grew up in the American quarter in Frankfurt, so as a German, he was already fluent in English at the age of 6, just like all the other 6-year-old Americans in the neighborhood. When I was a child, there were lots of Amis here in the Rhine-Main area, and we loved it. We were allowed to go to the American festivals, and there was soft serve ice cream. In the early 80s, the military often drove through our little village to hold exercises in the forest. That was always very exciting, and we would wave at them. Since the soldiers already knew that we were waiting for them, they always threw us some American candy. So I only had positive memories and experiences with the soldiers stationed here. But now there's hardly any sign of them here. But to some people, this also feels a bit off. I'm from near Stuttgart. There are a few barracks there. One of them is right next to the university where I studied. You can see the facilities, but everything is top secret. The African Command is there, which monitors all military operations on the African continent. It's pretty crazy because I can't imagine that the reverse would happen in many nations. That foreign military bases are built at will. Some of them are enormous in size and important for all kinds of operations. I don't think it's good. From time to time you meet some of these people, there's also a high school in Böblingen, and they're really nice and easygoing. You know, typical American. But as a German, you just have a more critical view of the military and the ongoing operations, simply due to history. I'm sure you can judge that better, but the military just has a different societal status and position in the States. The Bundeswehr is more of a laughingstock here. Yes, I can definitely attest to that. I don't necessarily know if the Bundeswehr is a laughingstock. There have definitely been instances over the last few years where things went terribly wrong with equipment and helicopters that didn't work, etc. And when I came to the US, I was definitely surprised to hear about all of these perks that military members and veterans have. I mean, there is several holidays for people in the military and veterans. They get all these discounts at, you know, things like health insurance and all of those official programs. And even when flying, military members often get to board first. And those are all things that I never really encountered in Germany ever. The military doesn't really play a big role. I maybe know like one person, but not very closely anymore, who is in the military. And it's not something that has a super high reputation in Germany. I don't think a lot of people would go up to someone in the Bundeswehr and thank them for their service, which I don't know if that's good or bad. It's a big topic. We don't have to get into that a whole lot. But long story short, yes, I can attest to what this person said about the different societal status. I also actually had a few people reach out for this topic who are in the German military, so the Bundeswehr, or who used to be. I was deployed as a so-called German guard with the Bundeswehr at Ramstein Air Force Base and loved my time there. Little America with all its products. You could even buy a Ford Mustang there. I still had to do the 15 months of basic military service. For context, up until 2011, Germany had this mandatory military training for men at the age of 18. They either had to do that or they could do something called Zivildienst instead, which was like a civil service where you could work at a hospital or some kind of social institution. But yeah, they got rid of that in 2011. Among other things, I was at the Grafenwöhr military training.
I did not know that they got rid of that. I did know that, you know, up until 2011, that, you know, if you are a male in Germany, a German male, that yes, you did one or the other. But I didn't know that they got rid of that. I think that's a good thing, you know, to give them that choice and not force them into the military if they didn't want to do civil service. I think that was a good move.
Training area, which belongs to the US Armed Forces. I also know the Ramstein Air Base from visits to the Ramstein Bazaar. I have no problem with the international cooperation and stationing. Due to the current developments in particular, it is certainly not entirely wrong to be part of a functioning alliance that serves as a counterweight in a worst-case scenario. The example of Ukraine is a good illustration of the fact that some statesmen who have access to the necessary pool of armed forces are not necessarily interested in negotiations when political problems occur. And unfortunately, there are too many such statesmen who are out to cause a ruckus. A lot of people actually brought up the Ukraine war in this context. I've been driving through Grafenwöhr and Vilseck, and it somehow feels like a different world. It's true. American cars, signs on stores in English, lots of signs saying danger of life, do not enter, or simply roads that you're not allowed to drive on because you would be entering military grounds. It all has its pros and cons, and yes, in principle it is good, and during the early days of the Ukraine war, I also felt a little safer because the Americans had over 10,000 soldiers stationed in the immediate vicinity. René, again a Bundeswehr soldier, said, "I think cooperation between our armed forces is important and it makes me feel safer, especially with the current Putin situation. Where does someone like Putin stop? If we don't let our watchdog growl, I would imagine that we will very quickly suffer a similar fate to the Ukrainians, only with a quicker bad ending. I appreciate this large community and NATO's sense of security." Another message said, "I'm aware of them and it doesn't bother me at all. On the contrary, they exist because of the NATO and are part of what protects us. Since the start of the war in Ukraine in 2014, but especially since the start of the Russian full-scale invasion last year, I'm very glad that we don't stand alone. The only thing that bothers me is the use of air bases in Germany for target killings with the help of drones. Killing someone who is not actively engaging in a war is simply murder, may that person be a terrorist or not. A democratic country should give people a fair trial to defend themselves. If that's not an option, just killing them is the wrong way." I'm aware of the existence of military bases in Germany. Since I live close to Leipzig, none of them exist close to me. They don't bother me. The US is a military ally of us, and it's for our safety against Russia. I'm ambivalent. On the one hand, the US military has created many civilian jobs. On the other hand, the combat drones in the east were controlled from Ramstein. In times of a war in Ukraine, I don't think it's such a bad thing to have NATO troops in the country who can intervene very quickly if necessary. As I said, a lot of the messages were a little mixed, like this one. Generally speaking, the bases are more of a net positive for Germany itself. Cultural exchange, economic impact, and security, of course. However, the fact that the USA itself has such internal political problems that the bases could now be seen as a danger and used for arbitrary imperialism is problematic. As someone who has lived in many countries, I see the presence of the Americans as rather positive, but what these bases do and what they stand for is becoming more and more of a problem morally from my point of view. But I can't think of any alternative without worsening relations with the states. I'm a bit torn. The fact that they're all in southern Germany has probably also shaped the image of Germany in the USA. Yep, that's definitely a big factor. I actually made a video about that topic last year. I'll link that for you guys up here and down below. As a North German, that's always disconcerting. The fact that imperialistic bad habits of the USA also run via Ramstein is also negative. Talking about drone pilots. Good is that they brought rock and roll to Germany, and money after World War II. The topic of military bases doesn't bother me in any way. I think it's a shame that since 9/11, you no longer have the chance to visit them. They could be great cultural hubs in addition to their military use. They often have pretty cool concerts taking place there, for example. They also have American brands, etc. On the negative side, it's just pretty pathetic that we need these things. We're just not getting our own defense on track enough. Especially during times like these, we should be able to take care of it ourselves. I'm quite skeptical about the whole thing, especially because I find the whole American weapons and military culture very strange. But well, it's a different culture. Throughout the Cold War, there were always two views on the issue of American soldiers and weapons being stationed in Germany. Either it would make Germany a target, or it would make Germany safer. Nowadays, I no longer see any tactical reason for the deployment. The only reason for me to support it would be to bring America and Germany closer together again, especially when it comes to standing united against aggressors like Russia. The friendship between the USA and Germany is something worth striving for in my eyes, and if the deployment of US soldiers can contribute to this, then I can accept that. Nevertheless, the whole thing doesn't feel perfectly right. After all, there are foreign soldiers on our soil. I really only got a few messages that had a purely negative opinion about this topic, such as this message. I think the US Army has to get out of Germany. This has bothered me ever since the reunification. The military bases are a recurring topic among my friends and relatives. Nobody around me wants them. Honestly, it feels like soft occupation sometimes. Many countries are influenced by the US to varying degrees, but we are among the few who don't even get a say in it. It's been almost 80 years since the war ended. Even the Soviets left some 55 years ago. It's time for Ami go home. Okay, so Ami in German is colloquial for an American, and Ami go home was a slogan that was used a lot after World War II, especially in East Germany and the Soviet Union. There was even a song with that name, and it was then later also used during the Vietnam War and in the early 2000s in reference to the Iraq War. I consider the American nuclear weapons stored here to be a risk for us. If the Russians should ever get the idea to go further and attack NATO, no matter which country, we'll be a target. And I also got some messages from people that said that they've really never been in touch with this topic and don't really know enough about it to have an opinion, kind of like I used to be. All in all, this is definitely a very multifaceted topic, but I hope this video helped answer the question about how Germans feel about it. Thank you so much to everyone who shared their opinion. I'm also going to put some of the messages that I haven't gotten to yet on the screen at the end of the video. But what do you guys think about this topic? Feel free to add your opinion or personal experience in the comments below. Just make sure to stay respectful. I know this can be kind of a hot topic, but I really loved hearing all of these different perspectives from you guys, so I'm excited to continue the discussion in the comment section. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I hope I'll see you next time. Tschüss!
Well, there was some interesting points in that video. And my wife being German, and we met while I was in Germany, I asked her that question as well. One, had she ever even thought about the topic, and two, what she felt about it. And she's kind of on the same page as a lot of the comments that were made there, that it helps a lot with the economy in Germany, especially around where these military bases are. And being that she grew up near Ramstein, knowing all the soldiers that were around back then in the late 90s, and when she was growing up, there was a lot more military presence than there is today, obviously. But I'm glad that we have troops stationed over there just as a selfish reason, because I got stationed over there and then I was able to meet my wife. But I can see both sides of the argument here. One, yes, it's a huge economical factor having 38, I believe she said, thousand troops stationed in Germany and these military installations, because they do bring a lot of money into the economy. These soldiers shop outside of the military bases. They go to restaurants, they go to stores, gas stations. So that's putting money back into the German economy. However, I also see the point of, the Germans who don't want a U.S. presence there. And I also see where the Germans who don't want any U.S. presence in Germany, I can understand their point of view as well. Yes, I do believe that having a U.S. presence there kind of makes it another target, whereas if the U.S. wasn't there at all, maybe they wouldn't be a big target, as big a target, let's say. So I understand that point of view as well. I'm curious, I know the Cold War went on, so the U.S. was still stationed over there, to deflect Russia and all of that. But I also have a sense that the U.S. being the U.S., they didn't want to give that up, if that makes sense. Whereas the other countries, they're like, well, our job's here done, and we can get out. And so I get that. I feel like the U.S. just didn't want to give that part up, and they wanted to stay there and keep that occupation for whatever reason, good or bad. And I could be way off, but I don't trust the United States government at all. So I see the fear of what are they doing, especially these drone strikes, and are they following international law and the law of Germany. I wouldn't put it past the United States that they aren't all the time following all the laws. But it's a very interesting topic. One that I'm sure we could argue or discuss until everybody's blue in the face, but I do want to know your thoughts. Are you for or against? Do you know people in the United States military, besides myself, that that you live next to or in your area? Granted, if you live in those areas where there isn't a huge U.S. influence, or there's no bases, so there's no American soldiers, you're going to have a different feeling about it, obviously, than those who grew up in Rhineland-Pfalz that are near and around them all the time. Now, also as an American, as U.S. soldier, I'm not entirely, how do I put this? A lot of the issues, let's say, that happened outside of military posts, like at local Irish pubs, at the clubs, whatever, we always used to joke that if a fight ever broke out, you know who was in it. It was an American who started it because of their ego, whatever the case may be. I never once saw two Germans fighting. I never once saw, any other nationality. I will say, and I have to be careful here. I'm not being prejudicial or anything like that, but a lot of the other issues that I saw were Turkish, like in Frankfurt. But I feel like they don't like a lot of people. So I did have conflicts with them on a couple of occasions in Frankfurt, where they tried to start a fight with us. We weren't doing anything but walking around. But I feel like some Germans feel the same way. But as far as Germans go, I feel like anytime I went out to a bar or a club or an Irish pub or whatever, they were more than friendly, welcoming. They wanted to chat and buy you a drink and talk and whatever. I never saw them being belligerent. Granted, I'm sure it happens, but from my experience, it was always the soldier, U.S. soldier, who started some crap running their mouth. So I can see why some people wouldn't want that around. So I enjoyed this. This is a bit longer video, so I hope you made it through. And if you did, thank you so much. And again, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. I'd love to hear them, whether or not you agree or disagree. It's a good discussion, that we can have. So thank you so much for joining me today, watching this video. And until next time, I'll catch you later. Bye.